As Frank said, I originally come from Florida, and I'm married to Sandy, my wife. We've been married for about 20 years, just over 20 years. Sandy, my wife, is from Belfast in Northern Ireland. And we have three sons, Micah, who's almost 18, Joel, who's 15, and Matthew, who's almost 12. So we have two prophets and a tax collector in the family. And they were all born in London. I've been with London City Mission about 20 years as well. I've done a variety of things through the years. Worked for almost 10 years with homeless people in central London. I had the amazing title of missionary to the young homeless, which is kind of grand sounding, but basically I just kind of met with young people on the streets of Soho for years and years and just shared the gospel with them. It's I've been a Christian for almost 30 years now, and thank God, that I became a Christian so young. I was 19 when I became a Christian. So, I actually feel like quite a lightweight up here tonight because of the amazing thing that God's been doing in guys like Steve and others. But perhaps it's different. Perhaps my story is just different. I hope it's encouraging to you. I was born in a state called Colorado, in a city called Colorado Springs. I'm the youngest of five. So I have two older brothers and two older sisters. My dad was in the military, so he was in the army. He was a career army person. So each one of us were actually born in different states. One of my brothers was born in New York State. I had another brother who was born in Washington, a sister who was born in Arizona, and my sister Rena, who was born in Hawaii, and I was born in Colorado. So we moved around an awful lot. My parents are originally from Miami. So when I was a baby, since I was a baby till I was about 8 years old, I was in and out of foster care, in and out of children's home. My dad was a very, difficult to describe him really, but he was a very volatile, very broken man. He felt, I think, trapped in the military. He was in this kind of way of life where he felt forced into, his heart, I think, was to probably get a degree and become a doctor and become something in life. But because of, the brokenness family in which he came from, he was forced to join the military as a young age. So he was a bit of a womanizer, a bit of a person who was always out on the town and leaving my mom, to cope with the family. He'd be often gone for days or weeks or months. So my sisters and brothers and I would just be put into care quite often, foster care. So from the time I was about 18 months old till I was about 8 or 9, I was in different foster homes and children's homes. And along with my sister Rena, we were quite close in age, so we were together. And that left some issues in my life, which, I have to say that even as a Christian now, I carry with me. I am who I am because of the things which I experienced. God has done amazing things in my life, and I'll come to that in a few minutes. But I am who I am, but all for the glory of God. All for the glory of God, because He uses every experience, every situation, every, act of inhumanity that's forced upon us. God will in turn use it for His own glory. And so, it causes me to go back to God again and again because I have such an amazing sense of His grace and goodness in my life. But as I was brought up in care, eventually my dad kind of stabilized somewhat. We moved from Colorado back down to Florida. And as soon as we moved back down to Florida, my dad was off again. And he was off to Vietnam. My dad, you have to understand, was in 3 different wars. He was in the D-Day landings in Normandy. He was in the Korean War. and he retired, became an instructor in a military academy, but then re-enlisted, volunteered, and went to Vietnam. So he did a tour in Vietnam. So after his tour in Vietnam, we moved to a city called Tampa in the Gulf Coast of Florida. So my dad was around, but he wasn't around. He was around physically, but emotionally, he just wasn't there. So I never had any kind of relationship with my dad. And I'm telling you a lot about my dad because it's quite significant in my testimony, in my life. So that's why I'm emphasizing that relationship so much. And so he was there, but he wasn't there. And so, as a child, actually, I had really no thought of God. I had no, consideration that there might be a God. I guess I'd heard about Jesus. But I remember as a kid, maybe 10 or 12 years old, being quite confused because I couldn't understand why, if Jesus was born at Christmas time, he died at Easter. I couldn't it's pretty quick, but I thought, well, he's God, so he must have done some kind of miracle there. That's how confused I was about the Christian faith. And so I had no thought of God. And then, of course, as a young teenager, and believe me, I started very young. I started 12, 13 years old, smoking, huge amounts of cannabis and hash and taking, all kinds of drugs, pills and LSD, started taking LSD. And I found, actually, with taking acid, that, such a mind-expanding kind of drug, that I thought, what, there must be a God. And anyone who's taken LSD will understand what I'm saying. It causes me to realize through experiences I had with LSD that there must be something, a God, a being greater than me in this world. So anyway, that kind of set me on a journey, really, of finding this God. And I don't know, but I just knew in my heart, deep down in my heart, that this God was ultimate truth, that there was an absolute truth in the universe, and I needed to try and find that. And of course, I looked through more drugs, more LSD, astral projection, and all that kind of stuff. But I also looked through Eastern philosophy and yoga and meditation, and just I was just searching. I was just really hungry to know the truth. But nothing was really bringing me truth, bringing me peace, because I was really looking in the wrong places. And I guess, if you were to say to me at that point, and believe me, I had people say to me that Jesus was the way. I just couldn't figure it, because to me, Jesus was so American, It was as American as apple pie and baseball, you know what I mean? There was a church in every corner, and I'd seen the Jesus freaks, as I used to call them, the Jesus freaks, and I didn't want anything to do with that. When I was about 16, my dad had taken off again, and this time pretty permanently. My mom had, and that came about really through my mom had a stroke at the age of 48, the age that I am now. My mom had a stroke and almost died, came very near to death. And you know what? I didn't even care. I was just so caught up in my own stuff that I was just oblivious to my mom's suffering. And there she was, lying in her bed. She came home from hospital and she was basically paralyzed on one side of her body. And she was laid in bed, and she used to beg me, to make her fix her a drink or get her something, and I just couldn't handle that at all. But through some very, very kind Christians that lived on our street, she found help. They reached out to her with the love of God. And when she was well enough, they brought her to church. And my mom became a Christian, which was an amazing thing, because the name of Jesus, the only time the name of Jesus was spoken in my house was in a blasphemous way. And my mom had really been transformed and changed. And I saw this change in my mom's life. And she used to, whenever I'd be kind of going out doing my stuff, she'd say, she called me Bob. Bob, I'm praying for you. And I used to think, oh, don't pray for me, please. I want to go out and have a good time. And she used to send Sunday morning, she used to she went to a Baptist church, and believe me, nothing against Baptists, they're lovely people. But she used to go to this Baptist church, and she used to send these kind of young guys around to the house. You know, they had kind of short hair, and I was a bit of a hippie back then. I had very long hair. And she used to send these guys short hair and the ties and the white shirts and the, you know what I mean, very smart. And they'd come around, and she'd come in my room and knock on the door, and she said, Bob, you know, there's someone here to see you. And I kind of stagger out, and there was these guys, you know, really good intentions, really trying to reach me and trying to get me saved. But, you know, I was having none of it, because I took one look at them and I said, look, if I've got to look like you to be a Christian, I'm sorry, you know, I don't want anything to do with it, you know. And so I used to blaspheme God in their face, and just to get some kind of reaction, you know what I mean? So they wouldn't come back again. But a couple of months later, they would show up again at the door. And you know, but you know, I was hungry, and I did want to know God.